Hello and welcome to the Data Privacy Lawyer. My name is Funmi Owolabi and I'm the principal attorney at the firm. Today's review is going to be on a notice. So we're going to be looking at a privacy notice. This was last updated October 6, 2025. We've got the cookie banner, so I'm going to review my choices. This one permanently stays on, so I'm just going to save and close. Okay, so the Global Privacy Notice explains how Visa and its affiliates collect, use, and share personal information when you use our or our clients' products, services, offers, and promos. So they've got the definition of personal information. I think this is really valuable, and I'll explain why. I've talked a lot on this channel about tone and audience. Now, when a privacy lawyer reviews a notice, like myself, I always think about what would the individuals who are reviewing this notice, what would they be able to understand from what I am helping convey from my clients? What are my clients trying to convey about their privacy practices, and how can I put this right? The intended audience here are individuals related to promos, right? Are the individuals associated with promotion going to be able to understand technical privacy language? Generally, no, right? If I ask my father, hey, what does this word mean? What's a controller, right? If I ask my father, what's a controller? He's not going to know. But he might have a Visa product, right? So I always try and think about the individuals that I know that are not privacy lawyers. How are they going to be able to understand what a notice is telling them? Because they're the intended audience. The intended audience are those that use these products. So are they going to be able to understand privacy terminology? The answer is no. That's why I think definitions are so valuable. So we've got the categories of personal data. Now you'll see that they've used this word categories. Under at least US state privacy laws, there is obligations for businesses to demonstrate what the categories of personal data are. And you might see this in a different number of ways. Here we can see it's the bullet pointed notices that you'll see on this channel. If you've looked at any of my other reviews, you'll see that a chart, sometimes you'll see it in a chart form. And so essentially, you'll be able to see that different companies will display their categories of personal data in a different manner, but as long as the information is being conveyed in the geography where business processes personal data, then they're compliant. Now, I want to talk a bit about biometric identifiers. So they've listed here that they do process this identifier. In many geographies, biometric identifiers like facial recognition data, fingerprints, and keystroke timing are all considered sensitive or special categories of personal data. Now, what does this mean? It means that a business has to process this personal data in a more cautious manner because it has that special designation of being either sensitive or a special category. In most geographies, when processing this type of identifier, there's something called consent that has to be provided from whoever this identifier is being collected from. For example, let's say, for instance, I'm going or walking into a shop, and in order for me to enter that shop, I have to provide a fingerprint to enter the shop. The business is asking me, hey, Funmi, can you provide this fingerprint? In many geographies, in order for them to obtain that fingerprint from me, they have to obtain my consent. Now, consent is obtained in a very specific manner, depending on the geography, but generally it has to be freely given, it has to be unambiguous, it has to be just as easy to withdraw it as it was to collect it. Each of these factors need to be met, and all of the factors associated with collecting consent in the applicable geography before this identifier is collected. The reason I spent time talking about this is because let's talk about the front. In the front, this is what they're saying. We may collect this data. From a background perspective, I just talked about that consent. There's language that needs to be drafted anytime this identifier is collected in the applicable geographies that have to fulfill those factors. That's not something you as a consumer is going to see. I'll use the example of my father again, right? Let's say, for example, he has one of these products and they're asking for this biometric information. What he sees when he reviews this notice is that it might be collected. If any of these identifiers are being collected on my father, this organization would need to collect consent from him first, based on the geography where he's located. And that's not something you see in the notice. The notice essentially tells you what their practices are. We are going to collect your biometric identifier. What happens in the background is what their privacy program dictates. We need to obtain consent, and that's going to be distributed from those who are obtaining the identifiers themselves, like employees. Let's talk as well about geolocation information. This is another precise geolocation information, specifically in the United States, is considered sensitive. Again, there's going to be heightened restrictions on what types of activities will collect this identifier, and then the level of consent that needs to be obtained in the applicable geography. Now, one thing I want to mention is most countries at this point in 2026 do have a data protection law. Now, what's interesting is that there are some countries that do not. Or if they have language, it is very broad and vague and open to interpretation. And I say that because there is a lot more usage of mobile devices. We all have these like wearables, right? Like a watch or our phone, or even those glasses that you can take everywhere that have sophisticated technology. This identifier is being collected more and more in more devices that we as individuals purchase. And so it's really important for businesses to recognize if precise geolocation is going to be obtained and obtaining the appropriate consent if it's in scope. Because in many geographies, it is considered a sensitive category of personal data. I keep using both terminology because a special category exclusively exists in the European Union, but sensitive information is more used in the United States. And that's important because this is a global privacy notice. And as far as I'm aware, Visa is pretty much offered in every country. And I think the discussion for these notices are very valuable because when you're looking at privacy from a global perspective, you're not just looking at the geography where you're headquartered. You're looking at all of the geographies where products, services, offers, and promotions are being offered. So you need to take a special look at what your obligations might be globally if you're going to be putting global. So I really hope you enjoyed this review. If you have any comments or questions about what I've said during this review, leave a comment below and I'll see you in another one.